Okay, so this is one of the 100 days ahead. So, to my surprise, I checked out my stats and analytics here on YouTube and found that people are actually watching this stuff. So, I decided that for the next 100 days, I wanted to catalog and um, really describe what my moment to moment experience is like. And there's probably some lucid dreams or out of body experiences that will happen within this time period. But in 1 year, about a year, I have some debts to pay off. But after that is cleared, in about a year to 18 months, I'll ordain as a monk in Thailand. I'll move away from the United States and I'll go become a monk. So, and I don't plan on, let's just say I'll be taking that life one day at a time. So, yeah, on Thanksgiving, a pretty radical change happened. Um, Looking back, there were about five distinct phases of awakening that were pronounced, and all of them are characterized by presence. So I'll go as far back as uh, about 4 years ago. 4 years ago, there was a very clear awakening that happened. Maybe it was, yeah, 4 years ago exactly. Was reading Ramana Maharshi and on a trip on the way back from China, and there was this phrase in the book talks that said, "Liberation is to know that you were never born." And when I read those words, it did something to me. I can't. I was never really the same after that. I started to sweat profusely, and then it just passed. But just a few hours later, when I landed, my sense of separateness completely disappeared, and there was this awareness. I call it the awakening to the witness. This is what is described in books like The Power of Now, but it happened to such a sufficient extent that it was 10 days of this profound bliss and non-duality, and there was just this core awareness that was immutable and deathless. And as it blossomed, it became this experience of being everything, of being not being inseparable from everything, but literally being everything. I call it I am everything. So phase one, witness, realization of presence as witness. Phase two, presence as I am everything. Phase three, which happened many years later, or about a couple years later, the background witness was was no longer seen as a witness or as a thing to chase. It was perceived as that stopped. And I describe all of this in more detail in a video called 12 Years of Realizations. So you can go find that in my um, here on the channel. Later proceeded through this, then it proceeded through this kind of oscillation between this background awareness that was at times observing things and then at times inseparable from things. So it was like a oscillation between witnessing and I am everything, and then this sense of Ryan in the forefront, the personality structure. And there would be periods where you're everything, and then periods where you're the personality, and it just oscillated like this. So the very, very distinctive phase that I say has resulted in what I call the natural. I don't even like to use resulted, but what has been the most permanent thing up to this point was Thanksgiving 2021. So this is about 100 days, 90 days ago. I'm reading a commentary of some lines in the Bahia Sutta that go, in the seen there is only the seen, in the heard there is only the heard, in the cognized there is only the cognized. And a guy named Thusness, John Tan, was explaining his awakening that happened when he really understood these lines, that there actually was no separate background awareness. There was no separate witness. There's witnessing, but there was no separate witness from thought, from feeling, from perceptions, or from sensations. He described a bell being hit, and when the bell was hit, he heard the sound of the bell, dong. And in that moment, there was no observer of the bell. There was no experiencing the sound of the bell. The sound of the bell was experience. The sound of the bell was awareness. There was no separate awareness from the sound. Find the line between awareness and sound, or between awareness and any perceptions. You won't be able to find it. So he described this, and it was just like that gong that he heard 30 years ago cracked my head open, and there was this total collapse of the foreground and background split. So this whole thing that had been lasting years, personality structure in the forefront, sometimes I am everything in the background, and I am everything in the forefront, personality structure in the back, and like this cycling between the two. Uh, Completely ended in that moment. It just, there was no background. So background's gone, annihilated, doesn't exist. So all that exists is the foreground, the aggregates, experience just here. Not that there's there's an observer separate from experience. When that collapsed, there was just very natural non-duality and um, total inseparability, boundlessness. I was just sitting there on the couch thinking, this is impossible. There's no way this is gonna stick. I just read some lines of this guy's commentary. I went into the shower to see how consistent, stable the presence was, and whole shower was just pure awareness. No difference between. It was different than I am everything. There were previously I'd be in the shower and I'd feel that I was the water coming onto me, or I was the shower head, I was the curtains and the environment, while simultaneously being the body and being thought. This was different. There was no I am that was there. It was just, there was only everything. So there only being everything, it was perfectly non-dual. It's it's a subtle but a massive difference between I am everything and there's only everything. And this body and this aggregates and the thoughts that arise and the feelings and sensations, memories that arise, they are also that everything. But they're selfless and without an owner, without a center, without any reference points, just spontaneously there. So this was incredibly profound. Um, Continuous moment to moment presence, days of it, just absolute clarity. And yeah, so I reached out to the guy who wrote the commentary, and I said, "Hey, I read your commentary, and it's it just penetrated. The subject object split, dissolve, foreground background split is gone. And he's like, yeah, so you'll experience a 90-day period where this is very, very pronounced, and the subject object split may reemerge or may reestablish itself. It doesn't always just go in the first cut in the first 90 days. So it's possible that there'll be a reversion, but if you make it past 90 days, you can expect that this is just how your life will be from now on. So, uh, yeah, it's been 90 days. So I decided to start this and start to describe what this is actually like in detail. When I become a monk, I'm not going to be able to talk about these things anymore. I'm not going to be able to talk about out of body experiences. I'm not going to be able to talk about the nature of the awakening as it unfolds, because it's seen as a violation of a rule that has to do with claiming attainments. So all the stuff that has to do with any of this, I have a year or a year and a half to pump all of it out, give you as much detail as possible, and really explain it quite thoroughly. So I'm going to begin. What is this moment for me like right now? Okay. So I'm picking up this cup. Previously, this cup was perceived as a separate object. So there was a sense that I'm here and the cup is there and the microphone's there and the laptop's here. I'm here. The field of perception is here. Visual field is here. Sounds happen. Sounds arise from wherever they arise, and they're completely separate. So the entirety of life was, even in the first phase of awakening, which was awakening to the witness, the observer that was silently witnessing all of this, that was still duality. So, but now this cup is not perceived as being external from me. There's no sense of internal or external. So if there's no sense of internal or external, how can anything be external? If there's no sense of subject and object anymore, how can there actually be an observer? So it's like my eyes are looking at it, and previously, because my eyes would perceive this, like just that perceptual faculty of shifting my attention or my vision here and shifting my vision here or shifting my vision here, that would previously create the sense of being literally being an observer. But now, looking at now that sense of being an observer, if it arises at all, it is perceived as a sense. It is perceived as a feeling that is empty. Like the observer that was previously the knower is completely absent. So before, in earlier stages, presence was perceived as a witness. It was actually perceived as a thing. I called it the grace of wakefulness because it just crashed into my life. So I saw it as this thing that like descended. Okay. But now presence is experienced as complete absence, which gives life a very strange taste. Things feel illusory but open and spontaneous and free. Whereas before, all of the mental perceptions, like thoughts and feelings, there was this sense that there was an observer that connected all of them, or that there was an awareness that connected all of them. Like it was the background in which everything arises. But that background has been thoroughly penetrated as empty. So there's not a sense that things are arising on the surface of a background anymore. There's just perceptions or thoughts, feelings. They're just like spontaneous bubbles, and there's nothing that's actually connecting them. So for presence, anyone who's listening is familiar with Rigpa, Mahamudra, nature of mind teachings, or even Vedanta. The presence is present because there was obviously a period where there was a time or a moment where it was recognized, but that recognition is also empty. so so for years we're like there's this glorification of presence, but the recognition um of that presence, I call it the recognition of wakefulness. There's actually nothing there. If I try to look at the recognition, I can't find anything. So this is what's beginning to unfold for me, this kind of unfindability, ingraspability, unlocatability, incapacity to pin down anything whatsoever. That's what's beginning to open up and unfold. Previously with presence, objects seemed very real. Actually, it was like even just as early as 100 days ago when this subject object collapsed and there was only the foreground, only this was still perceived as very much so solid. But now that's starting to disappear, and that this taste of illusoriness is beginning to arise because presence is being cognized as absence, whereas before presence was being cognized as uh, initially a witness and then later some empty thing that I couldn't, but not thoroughly empty. But now it's like the presence is just completely inseparable from any form, any perception. The knowingness, the wakefulness is inseparable from whatever is within the field of experience. The presence is the taste of experience, it's the clarity aspect of experience. So that's how it is perceived now. And like from Thanksgiving, the samadhi, so that moment to moment continuity of mindfulness or of recognition, that goes up and down. So if I'm not using as much technology, um, not having as much conversations, not using the mind as much, or engaging in thought, then the samadhi is pretty high. It's like ranging in the 60 to 80% of moments in a day range. So recognition is very stable at certain times. So that fluctuates. But the non-duality and the natural state and the presence as absence is not fluctuating. The real sure there's a deepening of insight, but the subject object has not reestablished itself. The sense of me being here and this being here has not reemerged. So we could call that I don't even know what it's called in other traditions, but I heard some teachers say that that particular moment where the subject object split really dissolves. It's called kensho. And all the Zen books talk about the moment up to kensho, and then you don't hear much about after kensho. So the podcast that I run, and even the name of this channel is After Awakening. So makes sense in this context now, even though I named this stuff, this podcast, I gave the podcast that name a year ago. What I thought was awakening, and still call it awakening, but what I perceived as very deep awakening in earlier phases, like at times being everything and at times being the personality, the oscillation, the dance between those two. When that was happening, I perceived that as incredibly profound. And it was having this experience of being boundless everything, like being Shiva, like being God. The entire field of experience is seen purely as an extension of your own mind. There's still a reference point. It has a sense of being you or belonging to you in a way. That's the subtle obscuration in that insight and in that realization. But even that was just crazy compared to being Ryan, right? So what I found about each of these phases and the movement through them was each phase caused a like in the phase, if there was enough time or enough depth in that phase, it caused a specific change in view. Like it changed how you perceive things. It changed how I saw things and saw myself. So for 7 years, I was a spiritual aspirant, very much just focusing and meditating as hard as I could. And then one day I read Ramana. I had this experience of the witness and of presence as witness. And that experience was so deep. Those 10 days were so deep that it convinced me that I was no longer a person. I was no longer a story. I was no longer Ryan in time. I was now the background witness. So as the phases, as the realization and awakening deepened and continued, at each phase, there was a change in what experience or what awareness was perceived as. So initially, I so the Ryan was awareness. That's what it was. Like when I read Ramana Maharshi in the early years, there was no recognition of wakefulness. But when he was saying, "Oh, awareness is the I," you are awareness, just be as you are. I was being as I was, but I was just being Ryan. There was no recognition of actual awareness. And when there was, that awareness was recognized as the witness. The witness, awakening to the witness, was waking up out of being Ryan. Um, Awakening to when the awareness was no longer perceived as a witness, but it was perceived as kind of this like formless thing that relaxes and diffuses into everything. Um, or the phase I am everything. That was waking up out of being the separate witness. So from Ryan to the witness, from the witness to I am everything. Once I am everything was established, I no longer saw myself as a separate witness. And with subsequent stages, the same unfolding of insight and self-referencing happened. Now, uh, if there's a sense of like the sense of meanness can arise, but it arises as a taste. So it arises as a taste that's like the same as the taste of this water. So I can't say that the taste is completely eradicated. It's just that the taste is not continuously present at all, but sometimes it's there. It's just now the taste of the personality structure is just now its presence itself, just like everything else. It's empty presence itself, just like the water, just like the piss that I took. It's not. So previously, when the personality structure being the entirety of my existence, to now the personality structure being nothing more than a taste, like food, or like the love that I have for my friends, or anything else in experience. That's a radical quantum leap from 12 years ago. So that's a quick summarization of what this has been like. Um, I don't know what this will be like in a month or in 100 days, and that's why I decided to start doing this and cataloging this for 100 days. Initially, from when it started, a lot of people told me you should start talking about this. Just make videos on what's happening. Just do a short vlog, even for just 30 days after um, this kind of realization and awakening. But I didn't want to do that. Uh, just didn't feel like doing it. But now it has it has now become the case that uh, this is the thing to do. So next 100 days, you'll hear me give descriptions of what this is like and what exactly is unfolding, what particular insights are are arising or being being understood. Um, the main ones right now are Heart Sutra teachings, emptiness, and non-arising. I'm not going to get into that from like a philosophical or ontological point of view, but experientially and through the taste of experience, there's this sense of objects not actually being this microphone before, and it was so clearly that it's a microphone, and the relationship between there would be a relationship between me and an object in that way, as the object as I know it. But now I really see that what I know objects to be are just the knowledge that I have of those objects. The knowledge is what actually perceives the the particular object. That knowledge in of itself is also empty, also presence. And the object, like this microphone, there's there's this taste that's beginning to arise that things are dreamlike, that things are illusory, that things are empty. And that's certainly new. Um, in previous phases, when the foreground was the immediacy of the foreground was so strong, so it seemed like objects and perceptions are actually popping out at you. That's how real they are. But now, um, there's this sense of unrealness, illusoriness that's beginning to permeate the body and to permeate experience. So that's where it's at now. I hope that made sense. It probably didn't in some respects, but I did my best. And I'll keep these daily videos between 25 and 30 minutes. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. Don't have a clue, but you can expect to see me tomorrow. So hope you enjoyed this, everyone. Thank you.